welcome. Join me in welcoming Alain Hunkins. Just a quick introduction about this gentleman. Over his 25 years of career, Alain has worked with over 2,000 groups of leaders in 27 countries, including 42 of the Fortune 100 companies. In addition to being a leadership speaker, consultant, trainer, and a coach, he's the author of a book, Cracking the Leadership Code: 3 Secrets to Build Strong Leaders. He's a faculty member of Duke Corporate Education and serves on the academic board of the advisors for the New Delhi Institute of Management. And we are going to explore the topic of leadership from a consultant and from a practitioner's point of view.
It's my pleasure. I know our sub-theme is appreciation. I'm already feeling very full of appreciation for you, Gaurav, and just thinking about how our relationship has built over time with so much mutual appreciation. So I'm thankful to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alain, we all have a past which helps us become who we are. And why am I asking this question? Because something that stayed with me. I remember a couple of years back, we were having this conversation, and I said, who you are is how you coach, and you mentioned how you lead is who you are. And both these statements are intertwined. And that's where we spoke about who you are is how you father, who you are is how you mother, who you are is how you sister, who you are is how you live your life. Now, I would love to understand, who is Alain? And if you may reorient our audience, our guest, to take a quick glimpse of who is Alain, apart from the consultant, the authority, the coach that he is. If you can just take us on this beautiful ride.
So I think what you're getting at, Gaurav, to kind of frame the answer to this is, you said, who am I apart from the consultant and this and that? And so much of the labels that we have, that's the doer, right? It's the doing. I do this, I do this, I do this. And I don't know about you, but I find that for myself, it's so easy. And I look at so many peers and colleagues and clients and people that I interact with, so easy for us in the doing to look for validation in the doing, that if I just do this, if I just do more of this, then I will be fill in the blank, right? I will be happy, I will be successful, I'll be good enough, I'll be approved of, I'll be appreciated. And it's all about the doing and these labels, these outside things. Whereas I think a challenging question is, who am I when I'm not doing? Where is the being in my resting space and state? Who am I then? And one wonderful exercise that a mentor taught me years ago was we had to do this with a partner. So let's say it was you and I, Gaurav. We'd go back and forth. So you would ask me, you would say, who are you? And I would say, I'm Alain. And you would say again, who are you? It's like, I'm a man. Who are you? I'm 53 years old. And you would ask me this question again and again, who are you? And after a while, you start to really peel away these layers of identity based on doing. And I had another mentor that really helped me understand that at the core of our being, what is it that emerges out of you every day? Who are, if each of us has our own gift to give to this planet. I mean, just to think about all of the things that came into alignment for each of us to be born in this human form for what is an eternity, really just a blink of an eye in some ways. I know we're going deep early here in terms of our conversation, but who are we, in this blink of an eye? And to me, it comes down to, what is your mission? And to me, what is your mission, or what is my mission, becomes a core part of my being. So to answer your question in a very roundabout way, who is Alain? Well, my mission is to create a vibrant, alive world by kindling the fire of brilliance in people. And so for me, that mission is true whether I'm speaking with you right now, whether it means I'm offering a keynote speech or leading a training or doing a coaching. It applies whether or not I'm negotiating with my wife around our schedules for the next week, whether it's I'm helping one of my teenagers with their calculus homework, how I show up. I have the opportunity to try to kindle the fire of brilliance in everything that I do, and not just with others, but also with myself. So what am I doing? For example, I got up this morning and I went to the gym. Do I feel like going to the gym? I don't even ask the question if I feel like it, because I know that the habit of taking care of my body is going to serve me, because it gives me more energy in the rest of my day to be able to serve others. And I know you and I have talked about this in the past too, but the clearest line to happiness is to make other people happy. And so, this is why I am just so overjoyed to be with you today, to share in this and to support the vision that you have. So who am I? It comes down to my mission, which is, again, to create a vibrant, alive world by kindling the fire of brilliance in people.
Thank you for bringing that. And that's a question that I think we need to ask from all the leaders in the world. Who are they being beyond their actions, beyond their task, beyond their roles and designations that they hold so close to their heart? Because the moment the role goes away, the moment the designation goes away, they experience a deeper sense of vacuum and emptiness. I have experienced that in the past. When I don't have the designation, who am I? And there's a sense of emptiness, which is extremely difficult to fill unless I've worked on that. And that's where I think the dependency on an act, the dependency on a designation, the dependency on anything which is external to you leads to suffering. Tell us how your childhood has helped you get to where you are today. And I remember you often speak about your mother and your grandmother and the lessons that you've learned from them, the concentration camp story that you have shared with me. How has that impacted you as an individual, Alain?
Sure. I'm happy to share the story, because I think, so much of who we are comes out of our experiences, and then the stories we tell about those experiences, and then, the way we frame that moving forward. So at the time, I didn't think it was particularly unusual or unique. I just thought, that's just life. That's just my experience. Because, when you're a child, you don't necessarily differentiate experiences from each other. But I turned out I had a fairly unique childhood. So I was born and raised in New York City. That's not unique. I was raised by a single mom. Again, not particularly unique. Lots of people are raised by a single mom. And my grandmother, again, not very unique. But the unique part that Gaurav is alluding to here is the fact that both my mother and my grandmother are survivors of the Holocaust of World War II. They're both Jews, originally from Poland, but my grandmother moved to Belgium, and my mother was born in Belgium in 1935. And so the Nazis invaded Belgium at the end of 41, beginning of 42. My mother's 7 years old, and she is basically put in hiding through the Belgian underground. She is separated from her mother and then spends the next 3 years moving to foster families, living in a convent, having her hair dyed blonde, given a fake name. Again, 7 years old, doing this all from the ages of 7 to 10, and miraculously, both of them survived the war. My grandmother was actually arrested and put in a concentration camp. She was liberated at the end of the war. They were reunited in a displaced persons camp. And you can imagine that after having gone through that kind of a trauma, the bond that was so unshakable between the two of them. And so again, growing up, my mother and my father divorced when I was 1 year old. And so my grandmother moved in. So basically, I had these two Holocaust survivors, and that experience of that trauma deeply imprinted them. And it taught them a lot of lessons around, who do you trust or not? Are you willing to put yourself out there? Because they were literally in hiding for their lives. And so through osmosis, through being in that environment, it was not a joyful place. Honestly, it was not a joyful, like, hey, how lucky are we? Which is a different choice they could have potentially made, right? Like, how lucky are we to be alive? Let's celebrate every moment. But for whatever reason, that was not something they were able to do easily. And so I quickly found out that the vibe or the mood or the culture at home was quite different than it was at school, or let's say at my friends' houses. And so I quickly had to learn what's going on. And again, I didn't have words for this when I'm 8, 9, 10 years old, but I sensed it. I had that deep emotional sense of that. And I think early on, recognizing that there was a difference, that split, put me on this path to be more curious and sensitive about human behavior, more sensitive and curious around why is it that some cultures people thrive and enjoy and other cultures seem much more like gloom and doom. And so that experience really got my antenna and sensitivities up around, and I think about the work that I do now, I think is incredibly informed by the fact that I thought, gosh, on the one hand, my grandmother and my mother were liberated, right, from the camps, from being in hiding. And on the other hand, psychically, even though the war ended, I saw how the legacy of the war kept them stuck in that cage for most of their lives, the rest of their lives. And to me, that's fascinating. Obviously, one of the seminal books on that experience is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about his incredible experience being a young man and adult going through the concentration camps. And one of my favorite quotes out of that book is Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies your power to choose. And in that choice lies your freedom. And so I think of my work of helping to kindle the fire of brilliance in people. So much of our lives tend to run on automatic pilot, right? That unconsciousness. And I think so much of my work feels like it's giving people an alternative and an option to, first of all, feel safe enough to examine and slow down enough to see the spaces in between things, to recognize, what can I do differently? Is there a different choice in this moment that could be more generative, that could be more loving, that could be more appreciating of others, one that is going to create more sustainability moving forward? So you asked the question, like, how does that impact me? Oh, it's impacted me considerably.
Thank you. Few points are coming to me. One, I believe all of us have got traumas. And as you mentioned, you refer to Viktor Frankl, and when you spoke about the stimulus and the response, and in between lies our ability to choose our choices, and as you mentioned, freedom. It reminds me of a conversation where I spoke about, somebody asked me, what is the essence of coaching? And I said, coaching is transformative and progressive in nature. And as a coach, it's my responsibility to hold space for the other person, where the other person can experience freedom. And it's possible only when one is willing to live from a space of expression, connection, and contribution. The freedom that you spoke about. And then you spoke about generative future. You spoke about love. And in my conversations, I often share that we just need one person in an entire family who can let go of the past patterns and release the traumas that one is suffering from, and gift the generative future to the next generation. Who has been that one person in your life that has allowed you to let go of that past traumas and gift that generative future to you and to the next generation?
It's interesting. For me, it's been less a one person thing, and there's been numerous role models for me. And that specifically for me, how that came about was, so when I was 25, 26 years old, I was in graduate school. I was actually going to theater school. I was going to training as an actor. And one of my classmates had gone through an intensive men's weekend in our first year. His name is John. And what I saw in John over the next couple of years was literally transformative. And just seeing how John was able to express himself, and we can call it stepping into his power in a very clean, clear, authentic way. And I thought, I need more of that in my life, because here I was on the clock, 25, 26 years old. I had this thought, okay, I'm an adult man, I'm in my 20s. How come I don't feel like that? So John suggested maybe I should check out this organization and go on this weekend. And the weekend was actually modeled on an archetypal initiation. As you probably know, Gaurav, many cultures around the world have been initiating boys into manhood out of necessity, right? The fact is, in so many tribal cultures, the idea is, teenage boys have all of this energy, this testosterone. It needs to be channeled in healthy ways to serve the community. And of course, in the Western world specifically, we've lost touch with a lot of those we'll call them ancestral and archetypal rhythms. And so this training was built by some modern men in the 1980s originally, actually to be two therapists and an ex-Marine put this training together. And it was really modeled on this archetypal initiation. And for those that are familiar with the work of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, it really does model that whole sense of separation of what you know, going through some kind of an ordeal or challenge, and then coming out the other side and being integrated. And so I went on this training, and it blew my mind and it opened my heart. And I found there were so many men there, not all of them, but certainly many great, wonderful role models that I think have helped me and given me the safe space to heal. And to be completely candid with you, one of the pieces of my healing was I didn't realize how much grief I had been holding. There were buckets and buckets of grief that took a good amount of time to let go of. I hadn't realized how much on so many levels. And there was something that being able to know that you have a place that is so safe that you can show up with anything, and that there are people who can hold space for you. You talked about the coaching relationship, and I think a wonderful coach can mirror that safety as well. But for me, that was the place where I went, oh, and there's something that is so cleansing of those tears, so much cleansing that comes along with realizing that after the grief comes the next dawn, right? It's the next day. And it's like, I'm still here and I've made it through that, because in the middle of it, it can feel overwhelmingly scary and terrifying, and incredibly sad. And yet on the other side of that, there is this amazing lightness and recognition of the possibility of something new and different. But the sense of it is, when we're so full with holding on to the hurt, the trauma, the pain, the wounds of the past, there's not a lot of space for transformation, and which is why I don't think, we can't short circuit this process through a head game, that ultimately the heart has to be involved in this piece, and so it's very hard to appreciate when there's no room for appreciation, right? It's very hard to feel abundance when all I experience is lack and scarcity and fear. And so that's why I say that, who you are as a person is how you are as a leader, because it's got to be from the inside out for it to really be authentic and sustainable moving forward.
Yeah. Alain, did I tell you that I can listen to you the whole day? Did I tell you this? Yeah. It's so magical, because every time, every word that you choose, every sentence that you frame, every sentence that you structure, I think it speaks to every single cell of my body. Whether you're talking about the trauma, or you spoke about that you cannot serve from an empty vessel, or when you spoke about holding that space after the grief, the dawn appears. I think if you can just find that one person in your life, that's a blessing.
Yes.
And every time when I speak to you, I find that one person in you. I think I personally believe that how a blessed soul that you are, because you can hold that safety space, that safety net for the person who's talking to you. And like you spoke about that you come from art background, right? And you invested several years in art and education. Just curious, how has that discipline influenced and impacted your approach to leadership, both as a practitioner and a consultant?
Oh, great question. So if you think about the idea of an artist, I mean, the nature of the artistic or creative process is it's never a straight line. There's nothing straight line linear about it. It's messy, and it, generally has to do with trying a lot of things. We can call it divergent thinking, and just trying a bunch of stuff and then figuring out what works and going, oh, well, of the 18 things I just tried, number 2, number 7, and number 14 are really good. Let's take those 3 pieces. Let's put the other 15 to the side and let's combine that. And that's what we'll put out in the world. So in terms of my artistic background, I actually started as a musician. I come from, my father's family are all musicians, and I was a violinist from the time I was 5 through very seriously until I was 18. I played with the Youth Symphony Orchestra of New York. I played in Carnegie Hall. We performed there many times, starting when I was 13. And then when I got through college, I started acting in plays, and then I went to graduate school, went to a theater conservatory and have a master's in fine arts. And for me, this sense of trying to find the right answer in an artistic framework is different, I think, from finding the right answer in, let's call it, a scientific or mathematical framework. For example, if I say to everyone here who's listening, how much is 3 plus 2? There's one answer, it's 5. We all know that. Whereas when we get into, what's the right answer for Hamlet? What's the right answer for King? There's multiple, there's the script, but in terms of interpretation, there's a lot of possibility. And for those that are familiar with the concept or the discipline of improvisation, there's a general rule, and it's used in coaching now too a lot, this idea of yes and, right? So not negating things. And I think that for me, one of the pieces of being an artist, a performing artist, there's actually a few things, but one particularly is the sense of how can I stay open and curious to finding the next right answer? Because the fact is, there's many ways to get to the right place, but I have to be open to that and let go of my ideas of right and wrong. Again, as I think about if you're coaching someone and you're so concerned with, are they right or wrong, or I want to fix, you're playing the wrong game. This is not a right, wrong game. This is a listen, be curious, help the person find what feels best in this moment for them. Not that the other things aren't good, but what feels best and resonates most strongly for you now. So that's one big piece for me that came out of the world of art. The other thing, that when you are, let's say, playing in an orchestra, you have a conductor. When you're acting in a play, you have a director. And you get notes, you get feedback consistently. That's too loud, that's too soft, or whatever in the orchestra. And I think one of the important things, which is such a valuable life lesson, is that as an artist, and I think just as a leader, as a person in life, it is really useful to learn how to separate yourself from the work. Because one of the challenges that I see with so many people when it comes to receiving feedback is that we take it personally. And like, no, you're actually giving me feedback on my work. You're not giving me feedback on my self-worth and value inherently as a human being. The fact is, we are all children of God. We are all belong. We have a place for this. And sometimes the music's too loud. You got to be quiet. So in the scheme of this. And so I think, people have asked, you may have asked me this too, what can we do to accelerate our leadership development? I think one of the most powerful things we can do is ask other people for feedback. And so this sensibility of an artist really comes in handy, because it's a paradox. Because on the one hand, we have to have a thick enough skin so that we don't take everything personally. On the other hand, we have to have a thin enough skin that we can be receptive and sensitive and adjust and flex and fluid to what's going on. And that is a paradox, right? Because we're asking what seems like two very different things, and yet they are completely interrelated. Because the more open I can be to feedback, which means having the hard, tough shell, means that I can apply it and then shift and progress and move more easily and more flexibly and have more facility with what I'm trying to get to.
Thank you. It's not about this or that, it's about this and that.
Yeah.
You spoke about what's the next possible step forward. It reminds me of my conversation with a mentor, a teacher, and a friend, David Sibbert. I remember my conversation with David, and David mentioned that, Gaurav, every time when you're stuck, it's not about the right or the wrong step. It's always the next possible step forward. What is it that you can do right now? And just do that, because while you're walking, you will find the direction. And once you find the direction, you will reach at a decent place for yourself. That's one. And second thing, when you're talking about being thick-skinned and being fluid at the same time, right? Yeah. It's like, anything that you identify with is going to dominate you. And while you are receiving the feedback, remember, as you mentioned, the feedback is for the act that you just demonstrated and not who you are. So behavior is very much different from who you are as an individual. Alain, in the complex world that we are a part of, and since we are talking about appreciation, that's a sub-theme that we're going to dig deeper into. How can we learn to appreciate ourselves when there's a tendency in human beings, at least I have this tendency, to compare myself with the person that I'm interacting with. I've always admired you for the wisdom that you bring in. I admire you for the resilience that you bring in. I admire you for the voice that you have. I admire you for the talent that you have. And when I look at myself, I don't think that I have those talents, those traits. And thus, at times, I tend to underplay myself. How can one learn
Yeah.
to appreciate who one is? Because as you mentioned, at the end of the day, we all are the children of God.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I understand that at the cognitive level.
Yeah. So you bring up such a great question. And before I answer it, I want to frame the answer by the fact that how we are dealing with this today is very different than we may have dealt with it even 20, 25 years ago, in that our ability to compare ourselves to others has exponentially multiplied, right? So when I was growing up, again, I was in elementary school in the 1970s and high school in the 1980s. I was comparing myself to the peer group of people that I saw in real time, in real person, right? The people in my junior high school, elementary school, high school. So I'm comparing myself to maybe a few hundred people. Well, enter social media, enter the internet, and now you have the opportunity to compare yourself to millions, if not billions of people. And the nature of the human mind is we have a negativity bias, which means that if you're looking for someone who is prettier than you, you're going to find them. Because, on the bell curve of 7 or 8 or 9 billion people, probably someone who's just a little bit prettier than you are. You're looking for someone who's a little bit more athletic than you, you're going to find them. You're looking for someone who's got better six-pack abs, you're going to find them. You're looking for someone who's wealthier than you or smart, you're going to find them. And basically all that is going to do is make you feel bad about yourself. Yeah, so I think we have to be very judicious with this technology. I like to say, technology is a wonderful servant, but it is a lousy master. And I'm recognizing what is the emotional impact that all this technology is having on me. Because one of the first places, when I ask people, do you appreciate yourself? They say, oh, I just don't have time. It's like, but you have time to spend all this time on Instagram, checking out other people, comparing yourself. So I think part of it, and it goes back to your theme of awareness, is you can't appreciate what you don't notice. So are we willing to slow down? And this is where it's great to have maybe a support team or group or some structure. Some people have a gratitude journal, so that in the course of the day, knowing that at the end of today, I'm going to write down 3 things that I appreciate about myself. Or maybe you do it with your family at the dinner table. I know some people use a technique, they call it roses and thorns, from the day. What was a thorn from today? What was a rose? Lots of different ways to call it, right? So the idea is that you start to have a sharper focus on looking for the things that you appreciate. And the amazing thing about bringing that intentional focus is that it activates that part of your brain. It's called the reticular activating system, because when you start looking for appreciation, you find it, right? And when you don't, exactly. And you can't change what you don't notice, but you've got to notice it. So start noticing it and saying, all right, I'm going to seek out actively, what are you appreciated for? And if we want to cultivate that practice even more, the more specific we can get with appreciating things in ourselves and in others, the more connected we are. Because the goal of appreciation isn't to, oh, I'm going to appreciate 3 things every day. Check, check, check. Now I can feel good because I can put it on my to-do list. The goal is to actually start to move some strong affects, some strong emotions through the body. You want the feelings, those wonderful feelings and the hormones that come along with appreciation. And so the more specific we can be with ourselves and with others, I mean, like you just said to me, well, Alain, I appreciate this about you and your voice. That makes me feel warm. It's like, oh, I feel like you see me. And isn't it, at the end of the day, we all want to be seen. We want to be valued. We want to be recognized. And I think the best place to start is with ourselves, because we can practice that. And then the next place is recognizing so many of us appreciate things about other people, but then we have to take the action of moving the thought into word and deed and actually getting it out so the other person hears it and closes the loop. Sometimes you've heard the expression that you don't want to die with the music inside. You also don't want to die with the appreciation inside. All those things. And I'll just, an example, and I may have talked about this with you last year. So my father passed away in the summer of 2021 after a long bout with Parkinson's. And
So sorry.
one of the things, yeah, thank you. And my children were not able to be with him. I went out there. I was there. He was in Ohio. I live in Massachusetts. I was able to be with him for the last 3 days of his life as he was transitioning, but he was unable to speak. So any closure, verbal closure that he was going to have with me had already happened, which we had some of, but he'd already been ill for some time. And what it made me come away from that weekend when I came home, and my kids, who were teenagers at the time, they were 16 and 13. I just said to them, I just want to remember to tell you all how much I appreciate and love you every single day. And that's something I keep working at. And look, and the other thing I want to build on, Gaurav, when you said you can look at me and you compare this, the other thing that we do is we thin slice. So we see certain aspects of someone, and then we assume that the rest of their life must be as magnificent as what we're seeing. So I know we just recently had the royal funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. And so you can look at all these look, what you don't see are the heartaches and the headaches and all of the angst that is going on behind the scenes, because that is not curated for public consumption. And so what you have is you have a bird's eye view into all of your warts and your pain. And so the assumption is other people don't have that. Other people are feeling that too. And I think the more we can remember that, which is why it's so great to have honest conversations. I'm always amazed. I'm still in a men's group that we meet. And when I'm with them, it just reminds me, because it's so easy for me to get stuck in my own head of, I'm the only one who's dealing with this. Everyone else has got their act together. As opposed to when you start hearing other people and we're all sharing honestly, it's going, gosh, it's hard being human sometimes. It is hard being a human being on planet Earth. And we're in this together. And how can we support each other? And all these tools and techniques that you're having are all designed to help us, basically make this journey while we're these specks in this monumental journey. How can we do a better job of feeling better for ourselves and making other people feel better and be as helpful and as loving as we can?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all need to be a part of a tribe that you can call your own.
Yeah.
For the longest period of time, I was searching for that tribe. It's only a couple of years back that I started thinking. And then we put together a tribe. And every time when I'm in the company of those people, I feel so safe, so secure. And when I joke around with them that, I was looking forward to a set of 50 to 70 people who would be with me on the last ride to cremation ground. And when I started looking for them, I could not find that. That's the reason I said, hey, come be a part of the tribe. And as you mentioned about the appreciation part, I said, if there's one prayer that I recite on a daily basis, is Shukrana, right? How thankful I am, how grateful I am to be alive, to breathe, to interact, to be with the family that I'm blessed with, to be with my friends that I've been blessed with, to be with my elder brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, my little daughter, my wife, my colleagues, the team that I have, to Alain, the friend who's sitting in a different part of the world. I think it's such a blessing to be alive. Just shifting the gears, Alain, you work a lot with different leaders. And as you mentioned that you work with over 47 C-suite executives from Fortune 100 companies. What do you think? What are the common assumptions about leadership that can get people into trouble?
Great question. So I'll keep it brief. Is the biggest assumption I see, and this has a lot to do with leaders who are still holding on to what I call the inherited leadership legacy of the industrial age, of the 20th century. And the assumption they make is, I have to know. That's the assumption. I have to know. I have to be smart and be right and be the decider. I have to know all those things. And I think many of us can recognize that, right? It's about the sense of if I have power, I need to exercise my power by showing you how smart I am, how authoritative I am, how decisive I am, how direct I am. And those leadership qualities, I'm not saying they're bad, is they need to be tempered. They need to be tempered. It's great to be decisive, but any strength overused becomes a liability, right? It's great to be honest, but honesty to the point where it gets overused becomes cruelty. And so I think the thing that gets people in trouble, and underneath all of those things that I just mentioned, that's ego, right? It's this ego that believes that if I wasn't all these things, then you would not appreciate me. when in fact, just the opposite is true. In fact, it takes incredible strength and courage to be vulnerable, right? And in fact, vulnerability is a superpower connector to make other people feel that you are human, and they lean in towards the relationship, as opposed to, look at, the old model was, you're strong, look at, you're, never let them see you sweat, right? The new model is, I'm human, I sweat, like, you want to see it right here, take a look. I'm a human just like you. And there's so many things, I write about this a lot in my books and stuff, but there's so many factors that have shifted the equation as to why people are looking for a different role model of leadership than they have in the past. And I think it's important that, in 2022 and beyond, is that leaders catch up with where the followers are, because the followers, and they're speaking, we talk about things like the Great Resignation, the Great Reset, people are leaving their jobs. If we don't follow their lead, right, then we're going to be, if you want to find out who's following you, turn around. And if there's no one there, you're not a leader. So it's important to be able to consider where you've been and where you want to go.
Yeah. And I think the line between the leaders and followers is getting diluted now. And I think the interconnected world that we live in, it's a network that grows together for as long as you are connected to the right set of people. If all of them can grow together, I think that's where the growth is. Alain, as we are marching ahead, would love to understand, what is your understanding of what is the true essence of life?
What is the true essence of life? So to me, it goes back to mission. It's about discovering one's own mission and finding ways to live that mission. And again, if we think about a mission as an equation of, here's the vision of the world that you want to create. In my case, it's to create a vibrant and alive world. Plus, what's the action that you take to make that vision a reality? So for me, it's kindling the fire of brilliance. So I think the more that you can look at how do you combine your vision, your action, because I think when you find that and you show up in that every day, the natural congruence of that creates love. And I think at its core, and as you say that, what is the essence of life? I'm thinking back to my dad's death. I'm thinking to his funeral. I'm thinking about, actually, interestingly enough, the experience. I was with my father, for the hours before he died, and there was no priest. My father was not a religious person. There was no priest. There was no rabbi with him. And I felt like he needed a blessing to let go. I could see it was time for him to go. And I realized, all right, well, I guess I'm the person to do that. And so while I was with him, he's in the bed, and I put my hand on his head. And it was a very transpersonal moment. What I mean by that is, it wasn't like Alain, son of Paul, saying this. It was more like, archetypally, I was stepping into the role of blessing a man who's ready to take the next step on his journey and his adventure. And that's what I did. I put my hand on his head and I said, Paul, you've done well in this life. I bless you on your journey here. And I just stayed with him in the silence, just me and him in the room. And I felt in that moment, my heart opening, just opening up and just being with us. And that feeling of heart opening and the love pouring out, I had only felt that feeling twice before in my life. You know when that was? When both my kids were born. So there's something magical about these moments, these emerging into life, emerging out of life. And so to me, what I notice in these moments, what is the essence of life? If those are the bookends and the rest of everything happens in between, I think the reminders for me is the essence of life is love. It's ultimately, it is love. And how can we love more and more and more while we're here?
It reminds me of one of the quotes from Nisargadatta Maharaj, where wisdom says, I'm nothing. Love says, I'm everything. And between these two ends, life exists.
Beautiful. I love that.
Thank you, Alain, for taking us to this beautiful journey when we spoke about how you lead is who you are, and sharing what you shared, those seminal moments where you experienced what it means to live from a space of love. And the question is who you are constant, or does it change in your life's journey? Would love to hear from you.
I love that question. Thank you. Who you are, change. I'm going to go back to what we talked about earlier. I think yes, and yes, it changes, and there are pieces that stay the same. And as I and I know that sounds very oxymoronic or paradoxical, I do believe that there are core elements that keep showing up, and yet the surface elements, the surface, it's like again, what's coming to mind is this analogy of an onion, like the core and these layers keep changing, and there's a different layer, but there seems to be some fundamental core that I can never completely escape or run away from. There's part of that. And I think that's the nature nurture piece in all of this, is that, in the course of nurture, I can have many different layers I can peel away. But with nature, I think there is an essence that we do not ever leave, truly. That's where I would go with that.
Shukrana, 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 Alec. Always a pleasure speaking to you, my friend. Such an honor to be in your presence all the times. Genuinely appreciate your presence.
The honor is all mine. The honor is all mine, Gaurav. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to share this with you, and I look forward to continued conversations.